So, William and Catherine just made it official. Queen Camilla has been removed from Windsor Lodge. And what led to this moment is far more calculated than anyone outside the palace walls understands, because for months, Camilla wasn't just living there, she was systematically rebuilding it in her image. New security codes that locked out senior household staff. Private dinners billed to ceremonial budgets. A complete reorganization of the historical archives without a single approval from William's office. And for a long time, nobody questioned it publicly. That hesitation was exactly what Camilla counted on. But then Catherine discovered something during a routine scheduling meeting. 3 heirloom paintings commissioned during Queen Elizabeth's early reign had been relocated to a private dealer for authentication. Nobody in William's household authorized the evaluation. The paintings had been listed as permanently displayed. And when Catherine asked the restoration department about it, they had no record of the request. The paperwork traced back to a curator Camilla personally hired 2 months earlier, someone with no previous royal appointment and no security clearance from the master of the household. That single discovery opened a door Catherine couldn't close. What started as redecorating suddenly looked like asset redistribution. Original furnishings from the 1950s disappeared from their documented locations. Guest ledgers showed names Catherine didn't recognize staying for weeks at a time, billed under family hospitality. Staffing reports revealed that 4 employees who'd served the household for over 15 years had been transferred to lesser roles at estates hours away, all without notifying William. When Catherine pulled the personnel files, every transfer was signed off by someone in Camilla's private office, not the household director. That broke protocol in a way that couldn't be explained as miscommunication. Now, before we go deeper into how this unraveled, if you're hooked on these royal updates and want the full story as it develops, smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications here at Crown Watch. It keeps us bringing you the details others won't touch. Alright. So Catherine didn't immediately confront anyone. She did something smarter. She started asking logistical questions. Simple ones. Who approved the painting evaluation? Which account covered the new curtains in the East Wing? Why was the July guest schedule completely redone in May? The answers came back fragmented, vague, or incomplete. One assistant said the restoration head approved it. The restoration head said Camilla's office handled it directly. Camilla's office said the king was aware. But when Catherine asked for confirmation from Charles's private secretary, there was nothing in writing. No email, no memo, no formal request. Just assumptions that someone else had handled it. That's when William stepped in. He requested a full expenditure review for Windsor Lodge covering the past 6 months. The finance office hesitated. They suggested it might create unnecessary tension. William clarified he wasn't asking. Within 48 hours, the spreadsheets arrived. And they told a story nobody had pieced together yet. Maintenance costs had nearly doubled. Line items included antique acquisitions, private event coordination, and consultation fees that didn't connect to any scheduled state function. When William cross-referenced the dates, he found that some expenses were processed the same week long-serving staff were quietly transferred out. It looked like Camilla was clearing the people who might question the spending, then using the budget gap to fund her own projects. But here's where it gets darker. One invoice stood out. It was labeled Archive Management Services, charged at over £40,000, and submitted by a firm that didn't appear in any previous royal contracts. William's team contacted the company. They confirmed they'd been hired to reorganize and selectively relocate historical materials from Windsor Lodge. When pressed on who gave the instruction, they named an individual from Camilla's staff. William asked what was relocated. The firm wouldn't specify, citing client confidentiality. That answer made everything worse. Catherine, meanwhile, kept pulling threads. She spoke to one of the transferred employees off the record. The woman had worked in the lodge's private library for 12 years. She described being called into a meeting with someone she'd never met, told her role was being restructured, and given 72 hours to train her replacement. When she asked why, she was told the Queen Consort required a team more aligned with her vision for the residents. The woman tried to escalate the concern to the household director. She was told the decision had already been finalized and that resisting would reflect poorly on her record. So she left quietly. And she wasn't the only one. 2 other staff members shared similar stories. One had managed the lodge's ceremonial silver. The other oversaw floral arrangements and historically significant textiles. Both were reassigned without consultation. Both were replaced by people Camilla's office vetted personally. And both were warned, subtly but clearly, that speaking about the transition wouldn't be wise. Catherine recorded every account. She didn't try to reverse the staffing changes immediately. She just documented the pattern. Because if this was coordinated, then it wasn't about preference. It was about control. Then came the discovery that shifted everything. A palace conservator reached out to William's private secretary with a concern she'd been holding for weeks. She'd been asked to assess the condition of several items in the lodge's permanent collection, including a jewelry case that once belonged to Queen Mary and a set of correspondence between Elizabeth and her father. The items were supposed to remain on-site under controlled conditions. But when the conservator arrived for her scheduled inspection, she was told the items had been moved to secure storage and weren't available. She asked where. Nobody could, or would, tell her. She filed a formal report. It went to Camilla's office. No response. She filed a second report to the Royal Collection Trust. That one also went unanswered. By the time she contacted William's team, she was genuinely worried the items might have left royal custody entirely. William didn't wait. He ordered an immediate audit of every object listed in the lodge's official inventory. The audit took 3 days. When it came back, 11 items were marked, "Location pending verification." That phrase had never appeared in a royal inventory before. It wasn't protocol. It was evasion. William demanded the names of everyone who'd accessed those items in the past 90 days. The list included 2 of Camilla's new hires, her private secretary, and the external appraiser who billed the same consulting firm that handled the archive relocation. No one from the Royal Collection Trust had signed off. No one from William's household was notified. And critically, the items were moved during a 2-week period when William and Catherine were on a scheduled trip to Scotland. The timing wasn't coincidental. Catherine still tried to contain it. She sent a private note to Camilla, carefully worded, expressing concern about the missing inventory items and requesting a conversation to clarify the situation before it escalated administratively. Camilla's reply came back within hours. It was 3 sentences long. The items were being properly conserved. The lodge was under her stewardship. And Catherine's concerns, while noted, were unnecessarily detailed for matters already being managed. That response was a miscalculation. Catherine had given her a way out. A private resolution. A chance to return the items, clarify the spending, and adjust the staff situation without public exposure. Instead, Camilla dismissed her. And in doing so, she turned a concerned daughter-in-law into an adversary with a file full of evidence. Within days, more red flags surfaced. A security log showed that external visitors had been granted access to restricted areas of the lodge, including the archive rooms, on 3 separate occasions. None of those visits were cleared through the standard vetting process. When the security supervisor raised the issue, he was told Camilla's office had approved them under her authority as Queen Consort. He documented the exchanges and sent copies to the master of the household. Those emails were later found in Catherine's growing file. Then a household administrator came forward. Not publicly. Not dramatically. Just a quiet conversation with someone on William's team. The administrator had been asked to process an invoice for residential improvements, totaling £68,000. The work included custom wallpaper, reimagined lighting installations, and new built-in shelving in rooms designated as historically preserved. The administrator hesitated because those spaces weren't supposed to be altered without approval from both the Royal Collection Trust and the direct family members associated with the residence. She asked for documentation showing that approval had been granted. She was sent a 1-line email saying the work had been personally authorized by Queen Camilla, and should proceed immediately. The administrator processed the payment. But she kept the email. And when William's audit began, she handed it over. That email became the cornerstone of the case against Camilla. It was proof that she knew the rules and chose to ignore them. William now had enough to act. But he didn't act emotionally. He built a timeline. Every transferred employee, every missing inventory item, every unapproved expense, every restricted access breach. He cross-referenced dates, payments, authorizations, and outcomes. The pattern was undeniable. Camilla had been systematically taking control of Windsor Lodge, removing obstacles, redirecting resources, and sidelining oversight. And she'd done it while William and Catherine were managing official duties elsewhere, assuming the residence was being respected. The legal question was next. Did Camilla have the right to make these decisions? William's team went back to the original occupancy terms. They expected to find a broad grant of authority. Instead, they found something much more specific. Camilla had been given use of the residence as queen consort, consistent with supporting her public role and accommodating family needs. The wording was deliberate. Use was not ownership. Supporting her role was not a blank check. And accommodating family needs implied shared access, not exclusive control. Buried deeper in the file was a clause the household legal team flagged immediately. If the residence, its contents, or its operating budget were used in a manner inconsistent with its historical designation or family agreements, the arrangement could be reviewed and, if necessary, revoked. The authority to trigger that review didn't rest with Camilla. It rested with the senior members of the family in consultation with household administration. William qualified. And he was ready to use it. He didn't go to Camilla first. He went to the household officials and formally requested a review under the clause. The request was logged, dated, and submitted with Catherine's full file as supporting evidence. Once that happened, the process was no longer private. It was procedural. Camilla could object, but she couldn't stop it. When she found out, the reaction was swift. Her private secretary contacted William's office within hours, calling the review premature and inflammatory. The secretary suggested that any concerns could be addressed informally, and that forcing a formal process would create unnecessary divisions. William's response was simple. The concerns had already been raised informally. They were dismissed. Now the process would proceed as written. Camilla requested a face-to-face meeting. William agreed, but only with a household director present and only with the understanding that the review would continue regardless of what was discussed. The meeting took place in a private office at Kensington Palace. Camilla arrived composed, controlled, and accompanied by her private secretary. William came with Catherine and a single folder. Camilla opened by saying the situation had been misunderstood. The improvements to the lodge were meant to honor its legacy, not diminish it. The staff changes were about modernization. The expenses were appropriate for a residence of that significance. And the items in question were being professionally conserved, not removed. William let her finish. Then he opened the folder. He walked through the emails, the invoices, the security logs, the staff testimonies, and the inventory gaps. He noted the dates when warnings were sent and ignored. He highlighted the financial authorizations that bypassed required approvals. And then he asked the question that mattered most. Did she, at any point, inform him or Catherine that items connected to Queen Elizabeth were being relocated? Camilla hesitated. Then she said she'd assumed the household staff had communicated appropriately. William responded that assumption wasn't authorization. And assuming someone else informed the family was not the same as doing it herself. The room grew colder. Camilla shifted tactics. She said that as queen consort, she had certain operational discretions. That the king trusted her judgment. And that micromanaging her decisions undermined her position. William didn't raise his voice. He simply said that discretion ended where family property and royal budgets began. And that trust required transparency, which she had actively avoided. Catherine spoke next. She wasn't angry. She was precise. She asked Camilla why, when privately contacted, she chose dismissal over dialogue. Why the staff were removed without consultation. Why the invoices were processed under vague descriptions. And why items that belonged to the Crown's historical record were relocated without notifying the people responsible for protecting them. Camilla didn't answer directly. She said Catherine was too focused on details that distracted from the larger picture. That the monarchy had to evolve. That holding on to every tradition made progress impossible. Catherine's reply was immediate. Progress didn't require erasing the past. And evolution didn't mean bypassing the people who shared responsibility for these spaces. Camilla had been given use of the lodge. She'd treated it like a personal acquisition. And when asked to explain, she'd relied on status instead of facts. The meeting ended without resolution. But it didn't need one. The review was already underway. Over the next 72 hours, officials completed their assessment. They confirmed that multiple breaches had occurred. Expenditures had been approved without proper authority. Inventory items had been moved without required documentation. Staff had been removed in violation of household employment protocols. And security procedures had been bypassed on Camilla's instruction. The conclusion was unavoidable. Camilla's use of Windsor Lodge had exceeded the terms of her occupancy. The household had grounds to terminate the arrangement. William was given the final decision. He made it quickly. A formal notice was drafted. It informed Camilla that her residency at Windsor Lodge was being revoked effective immediately. All personal staff were to vacate within 5 days. All personal belongings were to be inventoried and removed under supervision. All financial authorizations connected to the residence were cancelled. And all access codes, keys, and security credentials were to be surrendered to the master of the household. The notice was delivered by hand. No press. No announcement. Just a legal document that ended the arrangement Camilla believed was untouchable. Her office tried to delay. They requested an extension. They argued the timeline was punitive. They suggested mediation. William's office responded with one sentence. The terms are final. On the morning of the 5th day, a convoy of vehicles arrived at Windsor Lodge. Household staff, security personnel, and inventory coordinators moved through the residence room by room. Camilla's personal items were separated from royal property. Disputed objects were photographed and held for further review. Renovations that violated preservation standards were documented for reversal. By mid-afternoon, the residence had been cleared of Camilla's presence. She never returned. The keys were handed over in a private office with no ceremony and no witnesses beyond those required by protocol. Camilla left without a statement. Her staff declined to comment. And the palace issued only the briefest confirmation. Queen Camilla's residence at Windsor Lodge has concluded. The property will return to shared family use under household administration. But the impact went far beyond one property. Staff throughout the royal households understood what had happened. Authority, even at the highest levels, had limits. And William and Catherine had proven they would enforce them. Camilla's assumption that nobody would challenge a queen consort had been tested and broken. Her belief that Charles's support made her untouchable had met the reality of documented evidence and procedural power. The items removed from the lodge were returned. The employees transferred without cause were offered reinstatement or comparable roles with formal apologies. The financial irregularities were referred to internal audit. And the residence itself was restored to the condition it held before Camilla's occupation began. William and Catherine made no public celebration. But privately, they'd sent a message that would echo through every royal household. Shared spaces would be protected. Family legacy would not be quietly erased. And silence in the face of overreach would no longer be mistaken for consent. Camilla's removal from Windsor Lodge wasn't just about a building. It was about accountability. And it proved that even a crown couldn't shield someone from consequences when the evidence was clear, the process was followed, and the people pushing back refused to look away.